Hello, everyone. Welcome to Contra Costa County Library's Outdoor Explorer online program series. Very glad to have all of you joining us this afternoon. My name is Cara, and I'm a librarian here in the county. And first, I just want to say a few quick words about our library system. The Contra Costa County Library connects you with resources, services, and materials at 26 different library locations. Visit any library to use our public computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi. You can also visit one of our branches with laptops for on-site use or check out a Wi-Fi hotspot for 3 weeks. Project Second Chance is Contra Costa County Library's adult literacy program that trains and supports volunteer tutors to deliver basic literacy instruction to adults throughout the county. Visit your local branch or our website to learn more about becoming a volunteer or a student. And at the library, you can access more than 1 million physical items, including international language collections, plus thousands of digital materials 24/7 at ccclib.org. Okay, once again, welcome to our online program series. We are happy to have John C. Robinson with us to talk about his book, Birding for Everyone. By attending today's program, you have the opportunity to enter a drawing. Today's prizes are a 2-person tent plus a folding pocket bird guide. And we also have a vintage-inspired wool blanket for a lucky winner. So after the program ends, your internet browser will show you a very brief survey, which will allow you to type your name and email address to be entered into the drawing. Winners will be notified by email and will coordinate sending the prize to your local library. So if you have a question during the talk, type it into the Q&A tab, which you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And at the end of the presentation, we'll pose some of the questions to our speaker, John C. Robinson. A professional ornithologist, keynote speaker, and environmental consultant, John holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology from Iowa State University. He is a 2-time best-selling author, and he has published 6 books about nature and birds and has led professional birding and natural history tours to South Africa and numerous locations within the United States. Since 1999, John has been an advocate for minorities in birdwatching and nature and has conducted research on how to connect our youth and young adults to nature through the magic of birdwatching. So he's worked in collaboration with Toyota and the National Audubon Society and continues to travel across the country speaking about his landmark book, Birding for Everyone, encouraging people of color to become birdwatchers. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And I'll wait for you to stop your screen share and then I'll start mine. There we go. Okay, so everybody should be able to see that screen now. So what I'll be discussing today are some of my experiences involving birds, nature, and the outdoors from over the past 50+ years. And near the end, I'm going to share some, I'll share how anyone can literally get started on their journey to becoming a birder or simply a student of nature. And the theme of this presentation is that you never know where your own journey will lead you. So that's kind of the theme of what we'll talk about today. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think back to a time, think back to maybe a walk that you might have taken on a warm spring morning. Perhaps it was a walk to a local woodland or a city park or a national forest, and you can feel the warmth of the sun, feel the abundance of life all around you, and you're walking along and suddenly you hear it, a very unusual bird song. And the bird finally comes into view, and its raw, harsh beauty has stopped you in your tracks. And you continue to look at it. And as this bird continues to sing, you ask yourself, how can this tiny woodland bird be so magnificently stunning in its appearance? Now, this image could become permanently seared into your memory. And years later, as an avid birder, you might refer to this moment as the day you encountered your spark bird, the bird that sparked your interest in bird watching. And this is the indigo bunting. It's one of the most abundant birds in all of Eastern North America. And it has occasionally even been seen here in the Bay Area, including Contra Costa County. And yet many people who rarely spend time in nature are not even aware that it exists. So let's dive into how we can help people become aware of birds just like that. So to start, I'd like to take a pop quiz, and I'd like you to really help me out here. I'd like to get a sense of some of the amazing experiences that some of you in the audience have already had, which involve wild birds. So in the question box, please record in a few words, what is the most exciting thing involving birds that has ever happened to you? And we'll get some feedback here of what people are typing in. So Kara, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I'm seeing some stuff start to show up here. Gwen
Okay.
shares watching a loon family.
Okay.
Marty is sharing watching a falcon diving for prey.
Okay.
Larissa is sharing seeing red cardinals for the first time.
Wonderful. Okay.
Dan says we love watching hummingbirds. Allison says crows flocking around a huge owl on a hike I did in Marin County.
Great. And all of these are fantastic experiences that you've had. I used to live in the Great Lakes in northern Wisconsin. I had common loons actually breeding in my backyard. And falcons are a wonderful bird. I was always impressed with seeing the merlin, which is a kind of a bird that's a little bit small, but it's kind of the size of a kestrel. They're kind of an interesting falcon. But here in the Bay Area, we also have the peregrine falcon and the prairie falcon, which are much larger. So all of those are great experiences, and I appreciate everyone sharing those. It looks like we got over 40 shares with that one question. So that's great. And I'll take a look at some of the other stuff that came in on that. Okay, so I'd like to continue sharing some of my experiences. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off by telling you a story. And it's the story of a boy who attended a middle school, but refused to read any books. And his library teacher, his sixth grade library teacher, noticed this and asked him, "Why don't you read any of the books we have here?" And he replied, "None of these books interest me." So the teacher said, "Well, what does interest you?" And that's when the boy began to explain that he was interested in the crayfish and the butterflies and the spiders that were in his backyard. And that teacher got a smile on her face. You know, it's the kind of smile that adults get when they figured the child out. You know, adults were always able to do that. She walked over to the bookshelf and she picked up a book called Call of the Wild by Jack London, brought it back and handed it to the child and said, "Here, read this." And the child took it home and began reading it, and something amazing happened. He couldn't put it down. And he came running back 2 or 3 days later and said, "Do you have any more books like this?" The teacher got that smile again, because this time she knew she had them. And she went back and got the companion book by Jack London called White Fang and gave it to the child. And after reading that book, even though he was only in the 6th grade, that boy developed a vision. And he knew that when he became an adult, he would be a biologist, he would study wolves, and he would live in Alaska. And that became his vision. So this teacher, in effect, gave this child 3 gifts. Number 1, an interest in reading. Number 2, a motivation to explore his curiosity around nature. But most importantly, she believed in him. And that boy was me. And my life changed in ways that I can only imagine as a result of that encounter. I still have a copy of this book even today in my library. And that's a scan of the front cover. But what's really amazing about this is these 2 encounters with this teacher only took like 120 seconds. And she literally changed the trajectory of my life in 120 seconds. So I owe everything today to this one encounter that happened to me back in the 6th grade. Now what I'd like to do is fast forward a little bit. And at this point, we're going to go to 1979. So I'd held my vision for 9 years. And around January of that year, my college advisor asked to speak to me. And he asked me what my goals were. And I told him, well, I want to be a biologist and study wolves and live in Alaska. And he said, you know, I've heard you tell me that so many times, but I want to know why you've not signed up for the ornithology class yet. And I said, Orno, what? What's that? And he said, ornithology. It's the study of birds. And I said, I don't want to study birds. I just want to study wolves. And his reply kind of grounded me. He said, well, you have to sign up for this course. It's one of the mandatory classes here at Iowa State. And you have to take it if you want to graduate. All right, so I was dragged kicking and screaming into the ornithology class at Iowa State University in the spring of 1979. So now we're going from January, we're going over to March of that year. And so now we're looking at March 1979. The class is starting. I signed up for it. And my ornithology professor enters the classroom. On the very first day of class, he walked up to the podium and he began his lecture. And he said, one of the first things he told us, he said, there are, known to man, about 8,600 different species of birds worldwide. Wow. 8,600 back then, 1979. And here I was studying to become a professional biologist, and I only knew about 5 of those species by name. Something transformational happened to me at that point. And on that day in 1979, I wanted to find out everything I could about the 8,595 species of birds that I never knew existed. I became a student of birds, their identification, their songs, their habitats, their conservation needs. And this was literally the only class I ever took where I was sad when it ended. So I decided I'm never going to let this class end. And there has not been a day since May of 1979 when I haven't thought about birds in some meaningful way. In short, on that day in March 1979, when I heard the number 8,600, I was in awe. And I think a lot of us have that really resonating experience when we experience awe in nature. And that's what becomes that spark that generates our interest moving forward. And looking back, I can honestly say that I really didn't find my passion with birds and birdwatching. In contrast, my passion found me. And so that's kind of the story of how I got started in 1979. And a lot of people have asked me, what do I like about birds and the outdoors and studying birds? And I think for me, one of the most important aspects of studying and watching birds is that it allows me to keep track of the seasonal changes in nature. And it starts with the joy of the spring's arrival. And it seems that with each year, when I see my first spring migrants like American robins, black-headed grosbeaks, or in this case, like the summer tanager, I have a greater and greater appreciation and respect for life. At this time of the year, the days are becoming warmer, they're becoming longer, our gardens are beginning to grow, our flowers are blooming, but the birds are one of our most visible cues to all of these seasonal changes that are happening. So let's listen to a bird that we don't really get to see a whole lot here in California, the summer tanager. And let's listen to what that sounds like. So that's just an example of one of the songs that you can hear in the spring. Now, as we transition into the summer, spring gives way to summer. And this is when we begin to see the birds leaving the nest for the very first time. The breeding birds continue to sing all around our homes, and we can hear some of their songs even at night. I know many of you here in the Bay Area hear the mockingbirds singing frequently at night. And here in the Bay Area, we can listen for the songs of the California towhee, the spotted towhee, the house wren, the Wilson's warbler, the northern mockingbird, which I've already mentioned, and the western tanager. So here's a bird that we get a lot in the backyards of our homes, and this would be the California towhee. Here's the California towhee, and you may not recognize it, but you'll recognize this song. So many of you have probably heard that in the summer, the long days of summer, right there in the backyard somewhere. Now, the fall is one of my favorite times of the year. And on a clear October day against a bright blue sky, you might have to look way high and listen very hard, but it's not uncommon to first hear and then see a flock of migrating birds like greater white-fronted geese, snow geese, Canada geese, or even something like the sandhill cranes, which are quite common in the Central Valley, not too far from Contra Costa County. This past fall, we even had a return to the Bay Area of migrant Lewis's woodpeckers, which is a species that is usually not seen here in most years. And let us not forget the winter. This is the time when we might feed birds in our backyards, but don't miss your opportunity to visit California's wetlands. We have some wetlands here in the Bay Area, but you can also go to the Central Valley, and especially some of the national wildlife refuges that are out there, where over 1 million snow geese spend the winter every year. And if you've never experienced that, this is just an amazing sight. This is a picture of some of the snow geese that you can see out there. And when they all take off in unison and rise at once, it kind of reminds me of what it must have been like to have been in a crowded baseball stadium during one of Hank Aaron's 755 home runs. And this is kind of what it sounds like. Okay, so that's kind of what I frequently get out of being around nature and the outdoors. One of the reasons why I enjoy so much spending time out there. But let's continue and take a look at some of the other things that you can do with the study of birds and nature. You know, by the time we're teenagers, as early as that, we experience events that we tend to live over in our minds again and again. I even have a memory from when I was about 5 years of age of a a bright red tulip that was in bloom in the porch, next to the porch in our front yard. And I still even have that memory even today. Then the brightness of that red flower was amazing. And I believe all of us contemplate what the favorite time of our life would be or is. And for me, it was April 1980. It was a sunny day. I was in the state of Iowa, and I could feel the heat of the sun on my face, as well as the warmth of the sun's rays emanating from the earth. And I was climbing up over a ridge that was overlooking an agricultural field. And just as I reached the top of the ridge, I saw two birds in front of me briefly. They became startled and they flew off. And as they flew off, they gave this very unique call note, which I didn't even recognize. And at that moment, time just stood still for me. And I sat down on that ridge and I looked out across the field for the next 20 minutes. And I simply could not believe how I felt. I was 21, I was healthy. I'd never felt more alive. And every time I bring back that memory, I get the same feeling. And if I could just stop time, if I had the power to just stop time and live for an extended period in one place, this would be the moment that I would choose. Now, I've never identified those birds that flew away. And you might ask why a professional ornithologist would choose this one moment, this one event, as the favorite time of his life. And I believe it was because I was young. I was 21. I had my entire life to look forward to. It was spring. There was a sense of resurgence and reawakening all around me. And I had just observed two birds that I didn't recognize what they were. And this seemed to reinforce the idea that every day, if not every minute, that I spend on this earth, there is a potential for a new discovery or a new experience that I can have. And because birds are all around us and because they're so visible, they have the potential to give every human on this planet a new discovery or a new experience practically every single day. And nature is filled with these opportunities out there. So in retrospect, this was another time in my life that I was in awe. And now, during times of stress or anxiety, and for most people that can take the form of a hard day at work or maybe a trip to the dentist, you never know. But whenever you experience something like stress and like that, you can always come back to this memory that you have. It becomes a safe place. It's a place where no one or no thing can reach you. And it's one of these safe places. It's free from stress, free from anxiety, and birds and nature give us these memories and safe places, and we can actually use them to relax, to calm ourselves, and to re-energize for the next day. Okay, so now I want to talk about being multilingual, okay? During my travels, I've gone all over the world. I've been to Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and I found it to my advantage to actually be multilingual. Not only could I listen to the native speakers, but I could actually speak their language as well. And in 2005, I even took a guided tour to a nature museum in Costa Rica, and the guide spoke only Spanish, but yet I understood everything. Now, when I took the ornithology class at Iowa State University in 1979, my professor noticed that I was doing something with birdsong. He noticed that I could literally go out in the field, hear a bird that I'd never seen before. I could hear a bird song once and commit it to memory. And he was very interested about how I was doing that. And when he pointed this out to me, I was surprised because I thought everyone in my class could do what I was doing. And he kind of pointed out to me that what I was doing was quite rare, and that even a certain percentage of professionals in this field have trouble learning their bird songs. And he encouraged me to help others learn their songs. And he even offered me a teaching position in his ornithology lab from 1980 through 1982. So I actually helped him to teach the same class that I had taken the year before. And it was at this time that I realized I was now fluent in 3 languages, not just English and Spanish, but birds as well. And since that time, I've really studied this technique of how to recognize a bird song. So let me just play you one example of how that works. So we're going to choose the Canada warbler. So here's a picture of the Canada warbler, and let's just listen to its bird song. So the first time someone hears a Canada warbler, that is a really confusing cacophony of different sounds that they make. And one becomes really challenged. Well, how do I memorize that bird song? So I had come up with a technique of how to do that. And I started studying my own technique, and I put a lot of those ideas into a book, which I made available on Amazon Kindle. And that book is appropriately titled Tweet, Flutter, and Squawk: How to Identify Birds by Sight and by Sound. So this is an ebook, which if you do have a Kindle device, you would be able to read that. But I take birds like the Canada warbler, and I give you tips on how to actually identify that song and memorize it so that if you hear it again in the future, you'll be able to recognize that. Now, I had just done that recently, but many years ago, I had the experience of publishing my first book. So again, I mentioned before that the theme of this presentation is you never know where your interest in birds or nature or the outdoors will take you. And a long time ago, in the 1980s, it involved me taking a journey that resulted in me publishing a book. So it started in 1982. I got my first full-time job at Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge in Southern Illinois. And not too long after moving to Carbondale, I was told by the local birders that I needed to get a copy of this book titled The Annotated Checklist of the Birds of Tennessee. Now, this had been recently published just a few years before I got there. I ordered it immediately, and believe it or not, I still have a copy of this book even today, 41 years later. Now, what amazed me about this book was how detailed and informative it was. And anytime you saw a bird anywhere in the state, the book would let you know the significance of that bird sighting. And eventually I met the author, David Bolin, and I was really impressed by his bird identification skills, which were among the best that I had ever seen. So 3 years later, I moved to Tennessee, 1985. I moved to Cross Creeks National Wildlife Refuge near Dover, Tennessee, and I began birding in many areas of that state. And one of the first things that I noticed about Tennessee at that time was that it lacked a resource like David Bolin's book. Now, I had never published a book before, but I began toying with the idea that maybe I could produce something similar to this book. And soon I found myself researching the Tennessee Ornithological Journal. It's called The Migrant. It's a magazine publication, and I purchased every single copy that ever existed. It goes all the way back to 1930. And it took me a few years to work on this book. And by the time I was done, it was almost 1990. So I read every issue of The Migrant for 60 years. And in late 1988, in a fit of naivete, I took my finished manuscript and I drove it to the offices of the University of Tennessee Press at Knoxville. Now, little did I know, but I was committing a major faux pas here. You just don't barge into the office of a book publisher and ask them to publish your book. That's not the way it works, especially if you're a first-time author and you've never done this. Now, luckily, they took my manuscript and they told me that they would look at it. And, you know, as I think back, I can only imagine they must have been probably laughing among themselves as I was driving home. However, after doing their own research and sending the book out for review, they actually realized that it was worthy of publication. And in 1990, I published the annotated checklist of the birds of Tennessee through them. At that time, I didn't know just how rare it was for the very first publisher that a first-time author shows his book to would actually agree to publish it, how rare that actually happens. And for me, I was a completely unknown author, never having published before. And although this book is out of print, I learned a lot in the publication process, and I've used that to my advantage. As I've gotten older, I've become more experienced with publishing books and so forth. Okay, so keeping in the same vein of you never know where your interest in birds, nature, and the outdoors will take you, let's talk about the Emmy Award. All right, so just to be clear, I've seen an Emmy. I've seen it. You can see it online, but I've never held one. I've never won one. Everybody wants to win one, but I've never won one. However, as a result of all the work that I was doing, I was invited to do a couple cameo appearances on 2 Emmy award-winning TV shows. The first of which was On Cue magazine, which was under WQED in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the second one was Fetch with Ruff Ruffman, which was a really interesting show that ran for a number of years. And you can actually still find rerun videos of these episodes across the World Wide Web. And while these series were initially aired on daytime TV, I remember walking into, I had to take my cat to my local veterinarian's office here in Solano County. And when I got to the office, one of the administrative staff kept looking at me kind of funny. And she finally asked the question, was I ever on Ruff Ruffman? And I said, yes. So she did recognize me, but I never won an Emmy. So that was an amazing experience, just having that. So since 1980, I've led hundreds of bird walks in local communities where I lived. It spans from Iowa to Illinois, Tennessee, and so forth. And sometime around 2002, some of the individuals who joined me on these walks, actually, they approached me and they asked me to take them someplace more exotic. And they even offered to pay me for my services. So for the next 5 years, I actually led birding and natural history tours to Tennessee, Texas, and Arizona. But what this did is it culminated in me co-leading a birding and natural history safari to South Africa, not just once, but twice in 2006. And my trips there were the proverbial memories of a lifetime, so to speak. We got to see so many things while we were there. Birds such as the southern ground hornbill, which is what you see here, all the big game that's out there. Lilac-breasted rollers were very common, not to mention many of the culturally significant locations that we went to. And for the birds, we actually, we even went to Kruger National Park. And all the places that we went to, we hired a local bird guide to help us. And his name was David Nkosi. And here's a photograph of him. He's a local Zulu. He took us to all these different places, and I learned so much from him on those 2 safaris that I went to. Okay, so never knew that my interest in birds in 1979 would lead me to do 2 trips to South Africa. But that's really the theme of this presentation today, is to encourage you to become more interested in nature and the outdoors, because you never know where it might lead to. So let me talk about what happened with Birding for Everyone. In 1999, I began to explore a curious question. Why were there so few people of color who were involved in birdwatching? I mean, at that time, I only knew about 4, maybe 5 people at most who were Black like me, who were involved with birds, and I had traveled all over the country. And my curiosity here with this question, it was triggered because I worked for the federal government. I moved to different areas of the country. And each time I moved to a new place and began bird watching, an interesting phenomenon would take place. All the local birders would come up to me and they would exclaim, "I've never met a black bird watcher before. And it's not like I was watching blackbirds." And I began to ask this question, why does this happen to me? And as soon as I began asking this question, I realized there were a lot of other people asking this same question. And my research eventually led to a decision to publish the results in a book. And as soon as I made that decision to collect all this information that I was researching and to publish it in a book, something even more amazing happened to me. State, federal organizations, private corporations, all these entities began giving me, donating tens of thousands of dollars to help me publish my book. Now that had never happened to me before, and it has never happened since in my book publishing career. But this one book had resonated with a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and everyone wanted to help me get it published. So the book was finally released in 2008. If you're interested, you can get rent a copy of the book through the Contra Costa County Library Systems. And if you want to own your own copy, it's also available on Amazon. So if birding is for everyone, how can you get started? Well, it's very simple. You can get started by visiting some of the local places right around you that are available and that have lots of birds. This includes Tilden Regional Park, which is a great place to go in the spring and summer. Briones Regional Park is very, very open space, lots of great hiking opportunities there. Black Diamond Mines Regional Preserve is a very unique place, and you can look all of these up on a map. And of course, the crown jewel for many people would be visiting Mount Diablo State Park. And all these places, birds are arriving right now. The spring migrants are coming back. Allen's hummingbirds are already here. So they're coming back from their wintering areas. Not to mention orange crown warblers and Wilson's warblers. There might be a few around right now, but within the next week or two, they're going to start to be everywhere in Contra Costa. And by the end of the month, if not already, you're also going to start seeing swallows, vireos, and even orioles visiting your backyard. Now, if you're not sure that you're ready to take that first step to visit these local places, you can actually show up at the next available meeting for a local Audubon chapter in your community. And that gives you an opportunity to meet like-minded people who are also studying birds and nature, and they can take you to many of these places that I've listed here. And of course, if you're a very social person, you could just go to these places, and at this time of year, you'll see lots of bird watchers with the binoculars actually looking at birds, and you can talk to them and they'll tell you all the things that are happening out there. So great opportunities here for everyone to get started in looking at birds. I'd like to, in closing, thank a lot of the people that helped me along my journey. includes my mother, who supported me when I made the decision to become a wildlife biologist and specifically to study birds. Marlene, my wife, who was very patient with me as I built my entire career around birds, nature, and the outdoors. David Nkosi, who really reinvigorated and inspired me to do more with everything that I'm doing. And many of the photographs in this presentation were by Kevin Carlson and Monty Taylor. So I'll leave this next slide up so that you can get my contact information. And what we'll do is we'll transition into any questions that might be in the question box. If you haven't asked your question yet, this would be a perfect opportunity to ask it now. And I'll stop and see what questions have actually come in. So, Kara, what
Sorry.
questions do you see out there?
Here I am. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting for a second there.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions. I want to jump the line. I'm curious if you'd be willing. The previous slide, I think it was, you talked about some of the birds that are showing up in Contra Costa County right now. And I'm wondering, the Allen's hummingbird, the orange-crowned warbler, and the swallows, vireos, and orioles.
Mm-hmm.
Would you show us those birds and maybe share what they sound like?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, and you might have to mention those again, but let's start with the orange crown warbler.
Sure.
Oh, actually the Allen's hummingbird. Let's start with that. I think that was the first one. So the Allen's hummingbird is this one here. And let me do something kind of neat here. RUFOUS, there we go, Rufous hummingbird. So there's two hummingbirds in the Bay Area that have kind of a reddish or rufous color. One of them is the Allen's hummingbird, and the other one is the rufous hummingbird. They're very similar to one another, but they sound when they're moving through the air and you hear the wings making this sound moving through the air, they sound very different from the Anna's hummingbird that probably everyone is familiar with. The key difference here is that the Anna's hummingbird, that again, most people are probably very familiar with, it's in the Bay Area year round, so it's always with us. But the Allen's hummingbird and the rufous, they are migrants, so red is breeding. So you're only going to see this bird during the breeding season. And I don't know that I have a song of that one, but I do of the rufous, which is very similar. So let's listen to that one. So that very busy, buzzy hum that you hear as its wings are moving through the air, both the rufous and the Allen's hummingbirds have that. The Anna's does not. So when you hear that hum, you know that there's a rufous or an Allen's nearby. In the spring, especially in March, the Allen's hummingbird is usually the only one that's here. As we get into April and May, the rufous hummingbird comes through. All right, now the next one was the orange-crowned warbler. This one is a very dull, greenish yellow bird. Not a whole lot of things going on for it, very dull plumage. But one of the things that you want to listen to is the song. So let me play the song first. So what you'll notice with the song is that it's this trill, and then at the very end, the trill kind of trails off. So it's a trilling song, and at the very end, it kind of tapers off. All right, so that's the orange-crowned warbler. What were some of the other birds that were mentioned, Kara?
Let's just do one more. Indulge me with one more.
Okay.
Videos.
Oh yeah, the warbling vireo is the next one that I think got mentioned. And this is a bird that has a very complicated song. So the way to remember that is that the bird seems to be saying, if I see you, I'll squeeze you. Let's see, no, if I see you, I'll seize you and squeeze you until you pop. So, and it goes very fast. If I see you, I'll seize you and squeeze you until you pop. So let's listen to that one more time. And that bird will begin showing up, especially in water areas along creeks and streams around mid to late March. Okay, what other questions do we have out there?
Very cool. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so we have some great questions in here. There's a lot of people asking about good places to see birds in wetlands in the Central Valley or Bay Area wetlands, if you can recommend any places.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, most of the national wildlife refuges in the Central Valley, which basically it starts in the Sacramento area and goes north. So basically, when you look at the national wildlife refuges that are along the I-5 corridor, there's going to be quite a few. And many of those places there's a place up near, I believe it was Willows, are great places to actually go. But many of those places, there's a whole complex of wildlife refuges that are up there. And the same as you start going south, you'll see a lot there as well. Many birding places around the Stockton area are fantastic for water birds. And even locally here in the Bay Area, we do have a lot of places. Lake Merritt is a beautiful place to go. It is in Oakland, but one of the nice thing is you can walk around the lake and you're really within almost arm's reach of some of the wild birds there. And even the birds that are a little bit further out on the lake are no more than 20 to 40 or 50 yards from you. So it's a great place to see a lot of wild waterfowl and actually get good looks at all of them. There are some reservoirs in the eastern part of Contra Costa County that are also good. And there are some wetlands going, some of the wetland areas going north on 680 just before you cross the Benicia Bridge into Solano County also have a lot of water areas where you can find a lot of water birds. Yeah.
Thank you. The wealth of knowledge you have there. Let's see. Someone is asking about the software that you were using for birds and sounds. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, the software is the North American Bird Reference Book. It's a software I built way back in the day. I'd say I released it in 1999. I last did an update on it in 2004. It's no longer in the stores, but you know, people can still pick it up. But basically what it is it's all the birds of North America, their songs, their range maps, their images, and you can have songs as well as you can compare one bird to the next. So if you go to onmymountain.com, you'll see links where you could pick that up if you're still interested in that. That's the only place that you can get it is on my website now.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, another person is asking, what can local birding chapters do to better involve people of color into birding? How best to reach out?
Yeah, so local birding chapters can actually get one or more copies of my book, Birding for Everyone. It's a great book to start. It gives you lots of ideas of how to do outreach and things like that. I could even come in as a guest speaker or guest field trip leader to serve as a role model for some of the people that you're trying to outreach to. But really what it takes is you're trying to find at least one person of color, whether that's Hispanic, African American, Asian, it's whatever community you're trying to outreach to, who can become the ambassador to that community. Because a lot of times the bird club itself has to rely on that person to build the trust in the community. And then once the trust is built, more people in the community want to come to the bird club. So that's kind of how the process starts. But people can individually contact me by email or phone if they have some questions about that process.
Excellent. Thank you. I would also say to the anyone in a birding group, reach out to your local library too. We love to host presentations and even guided walks and things like that. So use this as a resource as well. Okay. There's also a couple questions I'm going to combine into one about bird identification. One person is asking how best to identify a bird that I see in my backyard. And someone else is asking for specific books for backyard birders that you would recommend.
Oh, yeah. Specific books for backyard birders, I'd probably go with the one book that I always recommend is Ken Kaufman's Birds of North America. So Kenn, last name is Kaufman. And he wrote a book called Birds of North America some years ago, but his goal in writing it was to kind of slant that book towards the beginning birdwatcher. So it's a very easy read for someone who's just getting started. And what it does is it has illustrations of all the birds, so that when you see a bird, you can look it up in the field guide, and it kind of guide you into some of the field marks that you need to look for to figure out how to tell that bird from other similarly appearing birds. Now, the first part of that question is, how do you identify a bird? That is almost like a 10-step process that I teach, but part of it involves knowing the habitat. Certain birds prefer certain habitats. So part of that's going to help you figure out what that bird is the habitat that it's in. You're also going to be looking at the color of the bird. So color is very important. Some birds have yellow legs, some birds have black legs. You're going to be looking at the color of all the plumages and everything else. You're going to be looking at also the shape of the bird, what shape it is. And then the behavior is very important. You'll see some birds that like to attach to a vertical surface, like a woodpecker or a white-breasted nuthatch. You'll see some birds like the spotted sandpiper, which is constantly bobbing up and down as it walks along the shore. Not every bird bobs up and down, but the spotted sandpiper does. So these little behavioral qualities become important as well. My favorite, though, is song. The song or the call note that bird gives is oftentimes the best way to identify a bird. And that's why I was lucky that I just happened upon learning a technique or teaching myself that technique on how to do that. And so I find bird songs and bird vocalizations to be probably the most important factor that I use in identifying one bird from the next.
Thank you. I'd like to close out the questions with one last one. From all of your travels, which location was your favorite in terms of birding opportunities?
That is easy. That would be Stewart County, Tennessee. Now you might ask, why Stewart County, Tennessee? And if you ever visit Tennessee and you ever go to Stewart County, you will see that a lot of the land there is taken up by state or federal or county preserves and wildlife forests, wildlife refuges, state parks, and so forth. When I moved to Stewart County, Tennessee in 1985, there was one, I repeat, one flashing yellow light in the entire county. Now, you know what flashing yellow means. You come there, you slow down, and you look to see if there's any other traffic, and if there's not, you proceed. There were no red lights in Stewart County in 1985. So now transport yourself back to Contra Costa County and imagine Contra Costa County having no red lights. That's how rural it was in Stewart County. And the opportunities that you mentioned, the opportunities for bird watching were endless. There were so many places you could go: wetlands, swamplands, forests, grasslands, scrublands. There were so many places that you could go. And oftentimes you were the only person there looking at the birds. So I've never been in a place since that was like Stewart County in the state of Tennessee.
Well, thank you so much, John. We really appreciate you being here with us today and sharing all of your knowledge and experiences. It's really inspiring and just wonderful to hear. So thank you. I am going to just send you all in the chat a link. Let's see, does that send it? Here we go. You should see that there. That's just a link that'll take you to our website, specifically to a recent blog post that we put up about the remaining programs in our online program series. So hopefully you can make it to another one of our programs. We'd love to have you all back with us. And once I end this webinar, you should see the short survey. So be sure to enter your name and your email address and check for typos. So that you can enter into the drawing to win. And the bird guides that we are giving out to you guys today are the Ken Kaufman California bird guides. So,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
So works out. So again,
Okay.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate you spending the afternoon with us. And thanks, everybody.
Not a problem. Talk to you later.